The victory in the supply convoy battle was a turning point, but it didn't bring much rest for John, Rachel, and Daniel. The Krylos were quick to put them to work again, eager to see if their earlier success was a fluke or a sign of something greater. On board the Lumina, the humans began to settle into a routine, though it was far from comfortable. They trained with Krylos soldiers, studied alien technology, and learned to navigate the complex web of politics and alliances that defined life in the galaxy. It wasn't easy. Every day brought new challenges and the weight of representing. Humanity hung heavy on their shoulders. John spent most of his time with pilot Nira, a bird-like alien whose speed and agility made her one of the best pilots in the fleet. At first, Nira seemed distant, almost dismissive of John's abilities. She had seen countless warriors come and go, many of whom couldn't handle the demands of space combat, but John was different. He asked questions, listened intently, and pushed himself harder than anyone expected. Slowly, Nira began to open up, teaching him advanced maneuvers and sharing stories of her own battles against the Vorthik. Their bond grew stronger with each flight, and soon they were flying side by side, trusting each other with their lives. Rachel, on the other hand, found herself working closely with engineer Zin, a shy amphibian with a knack for solving problems no one else could. Zin's lab was a chaotic mess of tools, wires, and glowing crystals, but Rachel felt at home there. Together, they worked on upgrading the Krylos ships, making them faster, stronger, and more resilient. Rachel's creativity impressed Zin, who often marveled at how she approached problems from angles he had never considered. "You think differently," Zin said one day, his voice soft but full of admiration. It is refreshing. Daniel's journey was the hardest. As a soldier, he struggled to adapt to the Krylos way of fighting. They relied heavily on precision and discipline, traits that didn't always align with Daniel's instinctive and aggressive style. Lieutenant Viorin, a burly quadruped warrior, was assigned to mentor him. At first, Viorin saw Daniel as weak, a fragile human who couldn't possibly understand the realities of war. But Daniel refused to back down. He pushed himself to the limit, enduring grueling training sessions and proving his worth through sheer determination. Over time, Bren's respect for Daniel grew, and the two formed a bond forged in sweat and sacrifice. Despite these growing friendships, not everyone was convinced of humanity's value. Skeptics within the Krylos fleet whispered about the risks of relying on such an unpredictable species. Commander Sila remained particularly wary, watching the humans closely for any sign of weakness. She believed that emotions like fear and anger clouded judgment, qualities she saw as liabilities in the heat of battle. Her doubts were shared by others, including Captain Jorik, who valued results above all else. The tension came to a head during a mission to defend a remote outpost from a Vorthik attack. The outpost was strategically important, housing a key communication relay that kept the Krylos fleet connected across vast distances. When the Vorthik forces arrived, they struck with overwhelming force, deploying weapons that tore through Krylos defenses like paper. John led his squadron into the fray, weaving between enemy ships with reckless abandon. His daring moves inspired his fellow pilots, but they also drew criticism from Commander Silla, who argued that his recklessness endangered the entire fleet. Rachel faced her own struggles on the ground. The Vorthik had deployed automated drones, designed to infiltrate and sabotage the outpost systems. Rachel worked tirelessly to counteract their efforts, using every trick she knew to outsmart the machines. Her unconventional methods baffled the Krylos engineers, who were used to following strict protocols. "This isn't how we do things," one of them muttered, shaking his head as Rachel rewired a damaged console with a piece of scrap metal. But her ingenuity paid off, disabling the drones and giving the defenders a fighting chance. Meanwhile, Daniel coordinated the ground troops, rallying them to hold the line against wave after wave of Vorthik soldiers. His leadership style was raw and unpolished, but it worked. He shouted encouragement over the comlink, reminding the soldiers why they were fighting. "We're not just defending this outpost," he roared. "We're defending our future." His words ignited a spark in the weary troops, pushing them to fight harder than ever. Before Dot, by the end of the battle, the humans' contributions were undeniable. John's bold tactics had disrupted the Vorthek formations, creating opportunities for the Krylos to strike back. Rachel's quick thinking had neutralized the drone threat, preventing the outpost from being overrun. And Daniel's unwavering resolve had inspired the ground forces to hold their position against impossible odds. The outpost survived, and the Krylos fleet emerged victorious. After the battle, the mood aboard the Lumina shifted. The skeptics fell silent, unable to deny the impact the humans had made. Even Commander Sila softened slightly, acknowledging their unique strengths. "You are unpredictable," she admitted to John during a debriefing session. "But perhaps that is not entirely a weakness." The humans, however, were not satisfied. They knew they had proven themselves in battle, but they also knew the war was far from over. The Vorthik were still a formidable foe, and the Krylos needed more than just tactical victories to turn the tide. It was then that John proposed a bold idea: a high-risk infiltration mission to disable a Vorthik superweapon capable of destroying entire fleets. The weapon was located deep within enemy territory, guarded by some of the most elite Vorthik forces. It was a suicide mission by any measure, but John believed it was the only way to truly make a difference. Rachel and Daniel agreed without hesitation. They had come too far to turn back now. Together, they presented their plan to Captain Jurek, who listened carefully before giving his approval. "If you succeed," he said gravely, "you will change the course of this war. But know this: failure means death." As they prepared for the mission, the humans reflected on how far they had come. They had started as strangers, thrown together by circumstance, but now they were a team. They had earned the trust of their Krylos allies, proving that humanity had something valuable to offer. The road ahead would be dangerous, but they were ready. They had faced the unknown before, and they would do it again. On the eve of the mission, John stood alone in the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. He thought about Earth, about the people waiting back home, unaware of the battles being fought in their name. He thought about Rachel and Daniel, about the sacrifices they were willing to make. And he thought about the future, not just for humanity, but for all the species caught in the grip of war. "We're doing the right thing," Rachel said softly, joining him at the window. "No matter what happens, we've already made a difference." John nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah," he said, "we have." With that, they turned away from the stars and headed toward their next challenge, determined to show the galaxy why humans were the best allies for space combat. The infiltration mission was unlike anything John, Rachel, and Daniel had faced before. It wasn't just about flying ships or holding a line against an enemy. This time, they were going deep into Vorthik territory, where every move could mean life or death. The superweapon they were tasked with disabling was located on a heavily fortified moon, surrounded by patrols and protected by layers of automated defenses. The Krylos fleet couldn't risk sending in a large force without alerting the Vorthik, so it was up to the humans to slip through unnoticed and complete the job. Preparations for the mission were intense. John spent hours studying maps of the moon's surface, memorizing every ridge, crater, and potential hiding spot. He worked closely with pilot Nira to fine-tune their approach, ensuring that their small team could land undetected. Rachel focused on modifying their equipment, using scraps from the Krylos arsenal to create tools that would help them bypass security systems. She also built a portable EMP device capable of disabling the weapon's core, though she warned everyone it would only work if they got close enough. Daniel trained tirelessly with Lieutenant Viarin, honing his stealth skills and learning how to move quietly in low-gravity environments. He knew that once they were on the ground, any mistake could mean disaster. As the day of the mission approached, the tension aboard the Lumina was palpable. Captain Jorak gave them a final briefing, his voice calm but firm. "This is your chance to prove yourselves beyond any doubt," he said. "But remember, failure will not only cost your lives, but also jeopardize the entire war effort." Commander Sela added her own warning, reminding them that the Vorthik were ruthless and would show no mercy. Despite the pressure, the humans felt a strange sense of calm. They had trained hard, prepared thoroughly, and trusted each other completely. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The journey to the moon was nerve-wracking. John piloted the small shuttle, weaving between asteroids and debris fields to avoid detection. Rachel monitored the sensors, her eyes glued to the screen as she scanned for signs of enemy activity. Daniel sat in the back, checking and rechecking their gear, making sure everything was ready for the fight ahead. When they finally reached the moon's shadowy surface, they landed in a secluded crater, hidden from view by jagged rocks and swirling dust clouds. For a moment, they simply sat there, listening to the hum of the engines and the sound of their own breathing. Once outside, the team moved quickly, sticking to the shadows and avoiding open areas. The terrain was treacherous, with steep slopes and jagged cliffs that made navigation difficult. John led the way, his instincts guiding him, as he chose paths that minimized their exposure. Rachel followed close behind, carrying the EMP device and scanning for traps or surveillance systems. Daniel brought up the rear, his weapon at the ready, watching for any sign of danger. Every step felt like walking on thin ice, and the silence around them was deafening. Their first real challenge came when they encountered a patrol of Vorthik drones. These machines were designed to hunt intruders, equipped with sensors that could detect even the slightest movement. Rachel spotted them first, motioning for the others to take cover behind a cluster of boulders. "We can't outrun them," she whispered urgently. "They'll see us if we try to move." John nodded, thinking fast. "Then we distract them," he said. He grabbed a small explosive charge from his pack and tossed it into the distance, creating a loud blast that drew the drones away from their position. The plan worked, but it came at a cost. The explosion alerted nearby Vorthik soldiers, who began sweeping the area. The humans had to move faster now, knowing they were running out of time. As they pressed on, Rachel noticed something unusual about the security systems guarding the superweapon. The Vorthik had set up a series of overlapping energy fields, each one requiring a different frequency to deactivate. It was a clever design, meant to stop anyone from simply hacking their way through. But Rachel saw an opportunity. Using her modified tools, she managed to intercept the signals controlling the fields and reverse engineer their patterns. "I can disable them temporarily," she said, her voice steady despite the pressure. "But I'll need a few minutes." To do it, Daniel volunteered to provide cover while Rachel worked, taking up a position near the edge of the field. He crouched low, his weapon trained on the nearest corridor, ready to fire at the first sign of trouble. John stayed close to Rachel, keeping watch for any unexpected threats. Time seemed to slow as Rachel worked, her fingers flying over the controls of her device. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead, but she didn't stop, knowing that even a single mistake could trigger an alarm. Just as Rachel finished disabling the last field, a group of Vorthik soldiers appeared, their weapons drawn. Daniel opened fire immediately, his shots precise and calculated. The Vorthik returned fire, forcing the humans to take cover. Bullets ricocheted off the metal walls, filling the air with sparks and noise. John joined the fight, using his knowledge of combat tactics to pick off enemies from unexpected angles. Together, they held their ground long enough for Rachel to finish her task and signal that they could move forward. Inside the superweapon's core chamber, they found themselves facing their greatest challenge yet, General Korath, the Vorthik. Commander infamous for his brutality, stood waiting for them. He was a towering figure, clad in black armor and radiating menace. His presence filled the room, making it hard to breathe. "You have guts coming here," he growled, his voice dripping with contempt. "But guts won't save you." John stepped forward, his heart pounding, but his resolve unshaken. "Maybe not," he said, meeting Korath's gaze. "But guts are what got us this far." Without another word, he charged at the general, dodging blasts of energy and striking with everything he had. The fight was brutal and chaotic, with Korath's strength and speed matching John's agility and determination. Rachel and Daniel watched anxiously, knowing that the outcome of the mission depended on John's success. Rachel used the distraction to set up the EMP device, her hands trembling as she connected the final wires. Daniel guarded her fiercely, taking down any Vorthik soldier who tried to interfere. When the imp was ready, Rachel shouted a warning, and John rolled out of the way just as the device activated. A blinding pulse of energy surged through the chamber, knocking out all power and disabling the superweapon. Korath roared in frustration, but it was too late. The humans had won dot as the team made their escape. They knew they had accomplished something extraordinary. The superweapon was destroyed, and the Vorthik forces were thrown into disarray. The Krylos fleet seized the opportunity to launch a counterattack, turning the tide of the war in their favor. Back aboard the Lumina, Captain Jorak greeted the humans with a rare smile. "You have done what many thought impossible," he said. "You have proven yourselves true allies." Commander Sila offered her own acknowledgement, though it was quieter and more reserved. "Your unpredictability may be a strength after all," she admitted, her tone grudging but sincere. For John, Rachel, and Daniel, the victory was bittersweet. They had survived against incredible odds, but they also knew the war was far from over. Still, as they looked out at the stars together, they felt a sense of pride. They had shown the galaxy why humans were worth fighting alongside, and they were ready to keep proving it. The destruction of the Vorthik superweapon marked a turning point in the war, but it came at a cost. John, Rachel, and Daniel returned to the Lumina, battered and exhausted, their bodies pushed to the limit by the mission's demands. John bore the physical scars of his fight with General Korath, his arms bruised and his movements stiff. Rachel had burns on her hands from working too close to the EMP device, while Daniel carried the weight of the lives lost during their escape. Despite their injuries, they couldn't rest. The Krylos fleet was already preparing for its next move, and humanity's role in the war was growing larger by the day. News of the humans' success spread quickly through the galaxy. Stories of their bravery reached even the farthest corners of the Krylos alliance, inspiring hope among species who had long given up on victory against the Vorthik. For the first time, many began to see Earth not as a weak newcomer, but as a valuable ally capable of achieving the impossible. Captain Jorak wasted no time capitalizing on this newfound morale boost. He ordered his forces to strike hard and fast, targeting key Vorthik strongholds while their enemies struggled to recover from the loss of the superweapon. The humans were thrust into the heart of these operations, their unique skills making them indispensable. John spent much of his time leading fighter squadrons, his reputation growing with each successful mission. His daring maneuvers became legendary among the Krylos pilots, who began referring to him as the reckless human. At first, the nickname bothered him. He didn't consider himself reckless, but over time, he came to embrace it. After all, his willingness to take risks had saved countless lives. Pilot Nira remained by his side, acting as both partner and protector. Their bond had deepened since the infiltration mission, forged in the heat of battle and strengthened by mutual respect. Together, they became an unstoppable force, weaving through enemy formations like ghosts and leaving chaos in their wake. Rachel found herself in high demand as well. Her ability to think outside the box made her invaluable when it came to planning attacks or solving technical problems. She worked closely with engineer Zinn, who had become something of a protege under her guidance. The two of them developed new weapon systems and defensive measures that gave the Krylos fleet a significant edge. Rachel's creativity extended beyond technology, though. During one particularly tense standoff, she suggested using decoy ships, equipped with holographic projectors to confuse the Vorthik. The plan worked brilliantly, allowing the Krylos to capture a critical supply depot without firing a single shot. Even Commander Sela, who rarely offered praise, acknowledged Rachel's ingenuity as a game-changer. Daniel faced perhaps the greatest challenge of all. As the Krylos pressed their advantage, ground battles became more frequent and intense. Daniel's role shifted from coordinating troops to leading them directly into combat. Lieutenant Viren accompanied him on many missions, their partnership evolving into a seamless blend of strategy and raw power. Daniel's leadership style was unorthodox, relying less on rigid protocols and more on instinct and inspiration. He learned how to read the battlefield quickly, adapting to changing circumstances in ways that surprised even his most seasoned comrades. His courage under fire earned him the loyalty of the soldiers he commanded, who followed him without question. Into the fiercest fights, despite their successes, the humans never forgot the sacrifices made along the way. Each victory was tempered by the knowledge that others had paid the ultimate price. Daniel often found himself reflecting on the faces of fallen warriors, both human and alien. He kept a small journal where he wrote about them, recording their names and stories so they wouldn't be forgotten. Rachel joined him sometimes, sharing quiet moments as they remembered those they had lost. John preferred to honor the dead by pushing forward, channeling his grief into determination. "We owe it to them to keep fighting," he said once, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. Tensions within the Krylos fleet began to ease as the humans proved their worth time and again. Skeptics who had doubted humanity's value were silenced by undeniable results. Commander Sela, once the harshest critic of the human trio, started treating them with a grudging respect. She still questioned their methods, calling them unpredictable and chaotic, but she no longer dismissed their contributions outright. In fact, she began seeking out their opinions during strategy meetings, recognizing that their fresh perspectives often led to innovative solutions. One such meeting took place aboard the Lumina, where Captain Jorak gathered his top commanders to discuss the next phase of the war effort. The Vorthik were reeling, but they weren't defeated yet. Intelligence reports indicated that they were consolidating their remaining forces at a heavily fortified base near the edge of their territory. Taking it would be difficult, but doing so could deliver a crushing blow to the Empire. John, Rachel, and Daniel were invited to share their thoughts, a clear sign of how far they had come since joining the Krylos. Rachel proposed a multi-pronged approach, combining stealth tactics with overwhelming firepower. "We hit them where they least expect it," she explained, pointing to a map projected onto the wall. "At the same time, we create diversions to draw their attention away from our main objective." John added that his fighter squadrons could provide air support, striking vulnerable targets and keeping the Vorthik off balance. Daniel emphasized the importance of timing, arguing that the ground assault needed to happen quickly and decisively to avoid giving the enemy a chance to regroup. Captain Jorak approved the plan, assigning the humans key roles in its execution. It was a risky strategy, requiring perfect coordination across multiple fronts, but everyone involved believed it could work. As preparations got underway, the sense of anticipation aboard the Lumina was electric. Soldiers sharpened their weapons, engineers fine-tuned their machines, and strategists pored over every detail of the operation. For the first time in years, there was real hope that the tide of the war might finally turn in favor of the Krylos. The day of the attack arrived. The humans felt a mixture of excitement and dread. They knew this battle could define the outcome of the entire conflict. John led his squadron into the fray, guiding them through a storm of enemy fire with calm precision. Rachel coordinated the deployment of decoys and electronic warfare systems, sowing confusion among the Vorthic ranks. Daniel spearheaded the ground assault, rallying his troops with fierce determination and unwavering resolve. The fighting was brutal and relentless, testing everyone to their limits. At one point, John's ship sustained heavy damage, forcing him to eject just seconds before it exploded. He landed hard on the surface below, injured but alive. Nira immediately radioed for backup, and a rescue team retrieved him before the Vorthic could capture him. Meanwhile, Rachel narrowly avoided being trapped inside a collapsing command center after disabling its defenses. Daniel faced waves of enemy reinforcements, his body aching from exhaustion, but his spirit unbroken. Through sheer willpower, he held the line until reinforcements arrived, securing the base and ensuring victory. By the time the dust settled, the Vorthic stronghold was in ruins. The Krylos had dealt a devastating blow to their enemy, crippling their ability to wage war effectively. Cheers erupted throughout the Lumina as news of the triumph spread. Captain Jorok addressed the crew, his voice filled with pride. "Today, we have struck a fatal blow against tyranny," he declared. "And today, we have proven that unity is our greatest strength." For John, Rachel, and Daniel, the victory was both a relief and a reminder of how much they had accomplished together. They had started as strangers, unsure of their place in the galaxy, but now they were heroes whose actions had changed the course of history. As they stood side by side, watching the stars stretch endlessly before them, they knew their journey was far from over. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to face, and more lives to save. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, grateful for what they had achieved and ready for whatever lay ahead. The victory at the Vorthic stronghold marked the beginning of the end for the Dominion. With their forces scattered and their resources depleted, the once mighty empire struggled to mount any meaningful resistance. The Krylos alliance seized the opportunity, launching a series of coordinated campaigns to reclaim lost territories and push the Vorthic back to their core worlds. John, Rachel, and Daniel played crucial roles in these efforts, their skills honed. By months of relentless combat, they had become legends among the Krylos, symbols of hope and resilience in a war that had dragged on for far too long. As the final phase of the war unfolded, the humans found themselves facing new challenges. The Vorthic, desperate and cornered, resorted to increasingly brutal tactics. Entire planets were scorched in acts of defiance, and civilians caught in the crossfire suffered unimaginable losses. John, Rachel, and Daniel bore witness to the devastation. Firsthand, their resolve tested not just by the enemy, but by the moral weight of the conflict. Each life lost reminded them of why they fought, not for glory or power, but to protect those who couldn't defend themselves. John spent much of his time leading reconnaissance missions, scouting ahead to identify Vorthic strongpoints and potential traps. His instincts had saved countless lives, but the toll of constant danger was beginning to show. He often returned from missions with haunted eyes, the images of destruction lingering in his mind. Pilot Nira noticed the change in him and tried to offer comfort, sharing stories of her own struggles during the early days of the war. "You carry the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders," she said one evening as they sat together in the ship's observation deck. "But you are not alone." Her words brought John some measure of peace, reminding him that he wasn't fighting this battle by himself. Rachel worked tirelessly to minimize civilian casualties, developing tools and strategies to neutralize threats without causing unnecessary harm. She collaborated closely with engineer Zinn, whose expertise complemented her own. Together, they created precision-guided munitions capable of disabling enemy weapon systems without destroying nearby structures. Rachel also designed evacuation protocols for planets under threat, ensuring that refugees could escape to safety. Before the fighting began, her compassion earned her the admiration of both allies and civilians, who saw her as a beacon of humanity in a time of darkness. Daniel led ground operations with a mix of ferocity and care, always prioritizing the protection of innocent lives. His soldiers followed him without question, trusting his judgment even in the most chaotic situations. Lieutenant Viarin remained by his side, their partnership stronger than ever. During one particularly harrowing mission, Daniel ordered his team to hold position while he personally escorted a group of children to safety. When Viarin questioned his decision, Daniel simply replied, "They're counting on us." It was moments like these that solidified his reputation as a leader who put others before himself. Despite their successes, the humans never lost sight of the bigger picture. They knew the war wouldn't truly be over until the Vorthic leadership was dismantled and peace negotiations could begin. Captain Jorik called a council meeting aboard the Lumina, bringing together representatives from across the Krylos Alliance to discuss the final assault on the Vorthic homeworld. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure was not an option. John, Rachel, and Daniel were invited to share their insights, their voices carrying significant weight after everything they had achieved. Rachel proposed a surgical strike aimed at disabling the Vorthic command center, cutting off communication and coordination between the remaining forces. "If we take out their leadership," she explained, "the rest will fall apart." John suggested using stealth fighters to infiltrate the planet's defenses, creating openings for ground troops to move in undetected. Daniel emphasized the importance of speed and precision, arguing that hesitation would give the Vorthic time to regroup. Their combined plan was bold and risky, but it represented their best chance at ending the war once and for all. The mission to the Vorthic homeworld was the most dangerous yet. John piloted his squadron through a gauntlet of anti-aircraft fire, guiding them past heavily fortified defenses with nerves of steel. Rachel coordinated the deployment of EMP devices, disabling key systems and plunging the enemy into chaos. Daniel led the ground assault, pushing forward despite overwhelming odds and refusing to retreat even when the situation seemed hopeless. Every step felt like walking through fire, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that millions of lives depended on their success. In the heart of the Vorthic capital city, the humans faced their greatest challenge. The command center was protected by layers of security and guarded by elite soldiers determined to defend it to the death. John, Rachel, and Daniel fought side by side, their bond unbreakable even in the face of certain doom. Rachel hacked into the mainframe, rerouting power to expose vulnerabilities in the system. Daniel held off waves of attackers, his body battered but his spirit unyielding. John provided covering fire, taking down enemies with pinpoint accuracy. When the final barrier fell, Rachel activated the MB device, shutting down the entire command network. The resulting blackout plunged the city into silence, a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded it. As the dust settled, the humans emerged victorious, their mission complete. The Vorthic leadership surrendered shortly afterward, signaling the end of decades of conflict. Cheers erupted throughout the Lumina as news of the victory spread. Tears streaming down faces as the reality of peace finally sank in. Back on Earth, Ambassador Lavra Monroe announced the outcome of the war to a global audience. Humanity's role in the victory was celebrated as a turning point, not just for the planet, but for the galaxy as a whole. John, Rachel, and Daniel became household names, their stories told in classrooms, news broadcasts, and songs composed by alien musicians. Despite their newfound fame, the trio remained humble, knowing that their success was the result of teamwork and sacrifice. On board the Lumina, Captain Jorak addressed the crew one last time, his voice filled with gratitude. "You have shown us what it means to fight not just for survival, but for unity," he said. "Because of you, the galaxy has hope." Commander Scylla added her own acknowledgement, her usual stoicism softened by genuine respect. "You may be unpredictable," she told the humans, "but perhaps that is exactly what the galaxy needs." As the Krylos fleet prepared to return home, John stood alone in the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. He thought about how far humanity had come since its first steps into the cosmos, how much farther it still had to go. Rachel joined him, her presence a comforting reminder of all they had achieved together. "We did it," she said softly, her voice tinged with awe. "But this is just the beginning." Daniel arrived a moment later, clapping John on the shoulder. With a grin, "Yeah," he agreed. "And wherever we go next, we'll do it the same way, with guts, heart, and a little bit of chaos." Together, the three friends watched as the galaxy stretched endlessly before them, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had proven that humanity wasn't just capable of surviving among the stars. It was capable of thriving, inspiring, and leading. And as they prepared for their next adventure, they carried with them the knowledge that they had already changed the course of history. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, filled with wonders and terrors that most humans could hardly imagine. For centuries, Earth had been nothing more than a quiet blue dot on the edge of the cosmic map, unnoticed by the great civilizations that roamed the stars. But all of that changed when humanity made its first contact with the Krylos Alliance, a coalition of alien species united by their shared struggle against an enemy known as the Vorthik Dominion. The Vorthik were a relentless force, a militaristic empire bent on expanding its territory at any cost. They had waged war across the galaxy for decades, leaving destruction in their wake. The Krylos fought bravely, but their losses mounted with each passing year. Their advanced technology and disciplined armies were no match for the sheer brutality and cunning of the Vorthik forces. Desperate for new allies, the Krylos turned their attention to Earth, a planet still learning to walk among the stars. It was during this time of crisis that John Carter found himself sitting in a small office in Chicago, staring out the window at the city skyline. He was a man who had spent much of his life in the air or among the stars. A skilled pilot with years of experience in both military and civilian roles, John had always dreamed of exploring beyond Earth's boundaries. When he received the call from Ambassador Lara Monroe asking him to join a mission that could change the course of human history, he didn't hesitate. It wasn't just about adventure. It was about proving that humanity belonged among the stars. At the same time, Rachel Bennett was packing her bags in Houston. She had spent most of her adult life studying astrophysics, unraveling the mysteries of the universe one equation at a time. Her work had earned her recognition in academic circles, but she had never imagined being called upon to use her knowledge in such a direct way. When Ambassador Monroe explained the situation, Rachel felt a mix of excitement and fear. This wasn't just another research project. It was a chance to make a difference on a scale she couldn't have dreamed of. Meanwhile, Daniel Hayes was preparing for what might be the most important mission of his life. A Marine Corps veteran with scars both visible and invisible, Daniel had seen combat in some of the harshest environments on Earth. He had joined the military because he believed in protecting others. And now he was being asked to do the same, but this time the stakes were higher than ever. Humanity's future depended on people like him stepping up when it mattered most. The three of them met for the first time at a secure facility outside Washington, D.C., where Ambassador Monroe briefed them on the mission. She was a tall woman with sharp features and an even sharper mind, someone who had dedicated her career to representing Earth on the galactic stage. As she spoke, her voice carried a weight that left no room for doubt about the seriousness of the task ahead. "The Krylos are losing," she said plainly. "Their war with the Vorthik has reached a critical point, and they need help. If we can prove ourselves as valuable allies, we will secure our place among the stars. But if we fail, we risk being forgotten or worse." John listened intently, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. Rachel scribbled notes in a small notebook, her brow furrowed in thought. Daniel sat quietly, his arms crossed, his eyes scanning the room as though searching for threats that weren't there yet. Each of them understood the gravity of the situation, but none of them fully grasped what lay ahead. After the briefing, they boarded a sleek spacecraft provided by the Krylos. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a testament to the technological gap between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. As the ship ascended into orbit, John gazed out the window at the curve of the Earth below. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel awe at the sight of his home planet shrinking in the distance. Then reality set in. They were heading into uncharted territory, where danger lurked around every corner. When they arrived at the Krylos flagship, the Lumina, they were greeted with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. The Krylos themselves were a diverse group of species, each with its own unique appearance and culture. Captain Jorek, the leader of the fleet, was an imposing figure, a towering insectoid with shimmering exoskeleton and multifaceted eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Beside him stood Commander Scylla, a reptilian strategist whose cold demeanor hinted at years of experience in warfare. "We have heard much about your kind," Captain Jorok said, his voice deep and resonant. "But words alone cannot win battles. You must prove yourselves." Rachel nodded, trying to hide her nervousness behind a professional smile. John stepped forward, meeting Jorek's gaze with steady confidence. "We're ready," he said simply. "Tell us what you need." Their first assignment came sooner than expected. A convoy carrying vital supplies was under threat from Vorthik raiders, and the Krylos needed reinforcements to protect it. John, Rachel, and Daniel were assigned to join the effort, working alongside Krylos pilots and soldiers. It was a baptism by fire, throwing them into the chaos of space combat without hesitation. As the battle began, the humans quickly realized how outmatched they were. The Vorthik ships moved with terrifying speed and precision, their weapons cutting through Krylos defenses like paper. John found himself struggling to keep up, his instincts clashing with the unfamiliar controls of his fighter. Rachel worked frantically to analyze the enemy's movements, her mind racing to find patterns that might give them an edge. Daniel coordinated with ground teams defending the convoy, shouting orders over the comlink as explosions lit up the darkness. For a while, it seemed like all was lost. The Vorthik pressed their advantage, pushing the Krylos forces to the brink of collapse. But then something remarkable happened. John noticed a weakness in the enemy formation, a gap that opened briefly as they maneuvered. Without thinking, he shouted instructions to his squadron, guiding them into a daring counterattack. His improvisation caught the Vorthik off guard, creating an opening that the Krylos exploited with ruthless efficiency. Rachel played her part too, hacking into the enemy communication network and feeding false data to the Vorthik commanders. Her quick thinking confused their forces, causing them to hesitate at crucial moments. Meanwhile, Daniel rallied the defenders, inspiring them to hold their ground despite overwhelming odds. Together, the humans and their Krylos allies turned. The tide of the battle, driving the Vorthik back and securing the convoy. When the dust settled, the Krylos were stunned. They had expected the humans to falter under pressure, but instead, they had risen to the occasion in ways no one anticipated. Captain Jorak approached John, Rachel, and Daniel after the fight, his expression unreadable. "You performed admirably," he said finally. "Perhaps there is truth to the stories of your kind." The victory was bittersweet. The humans knew they had proven themselves, but they also understood that this was only the beginning. The war against the Vorthik would not be won easily, and the challenges ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Still, as they stood together aboard the Lumina, watching the stars stretch endlessly before them, they felt a flicker of hope. Humanity had taken its first step onto the galactic stage, and it was determined to leave its mark.